was.
It's just on.
I know. I hate that. I do not like on, just on. Get this thing started.
Yeah.
Because I got Mitch has got stuff to do, so. Oh, wow. Even that with the switch. What time you got?
5:37.
Oh, it's 5:31 on my phone.
5:31. Hey, Mark. All right, folks, going because people have commitments tonight. So this joint City Commission and CRA workshop on this January 29th, 2018. We've got 3 agenda items. Jeff, you want to?
You went to grab a couple commissioners.
Shirley and
All right.
Morris are outside. When do you leave tonight?
Tomorrow morning. Early. Missy, can you go grab them?
Here,
What,
here comes Jeff.
Yeah, Jeff was getting it.
All right, okay. This meeting started, so why don't you, we're already on Agenda 1, so
All
this
right.
is your agenda, Jeff.
Turn
So.
it over to Dave Tolsis, our CRA attorney, to just give a brief update regarding the pending legislation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners.
Good evening.
David Tolsis, CRA Board. The legislation in both the House and the Senate is still pending. The House, as anticipated, went ahead and moved their bill all the way to the floor and had a floor vote the first week of session. And that House bill has been, message has been transmitted to the Senate. The Senate Bill 432 has 3 additional committees to be heard, and as of today, none of them have been scheduled. There's a chance that one of the committees might meet on Friday, but there's no agenda yet, so we don't know. But once we hear something, we'll be certain to let everybody know the status of those bills. And that's the sum and substance of my report. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, David. Any questions on that? We really don't know. Just would,
Mr. Mayor,
sure.
any successful efforts by the lobbying groups to change any component of the bill that CRAs were opposed to?
Not that I'm aware of at this point in time. You know, but you know, legislative is very fluid. So until you see what's on an agenda, as far as any potential amendments, you never know. So we'll just continue to monitor it and keep you advised.
I would say the House version, Sandy, suffice to say, none of the lobbying efforts have affected the House bill at all. In fact, there's some aspects that have gotten even a little bit more draconian, but I think that most people that don't favor the legislation are looking to the Senate to run it, but I think there is a lot of it's going to, some version is going to pass both the House and the Senate. I would just like to offer just a comment. It's unfortunate that the CRA, I don't know to what extent people have seen this, but there is now a video that has been circulated that really demeans our CRA in 2 ways. I think just generally it uses it as an example of a poor use of tax dollars, and it blames the CRA for doing it relative to the tennis tournament. And say for the record that unfortunately they got their CRA contract. I think it's been the imposition from the city commissions for several years to forcefully asked the CRA to fund something that was really never their obligation to fund. And I know that this board has struggled with it this year. They've struggled with it every year that I've been in office in terms of where is the nexus of that tournament expenditure, which I think in 2000, for this year, was close to $1 million from the CRA. And that's unfortunate because I think all CRAs and city commissions are going to struggle for various reasons. I think our CRA, on balance, has been run very well through a long period of time, through just a tumultuous period in the city's history, and they've done so many effective projects, but as we all know, it just, people pick up on one thing and they use that to send a message, and it's unfortunate that such a terrible, terrible contract signed so long ago that obligated this city commission for decades for something that it never should have been doing has now been kind of tied around the neck of the CRA and is being used as somewhat of a propaganda film to support some other things. So it's unfortunate to put that out there, that this really has nothing to do and never has had nothing to do with the CRA. Anyway, we're going to move.
Mayor, we all met with Bill Hager. Has he been our champion of this, to your knowledge?
That's
You know,
what set up the video.
Tried.
You know, Bill's, I think, you know, Bill, it recognizes and he's told me candidly, look, he was in Boca, he saw what, I mean, their CRA, not as large as ours, but he understands what a well-run CRA can do, and he certainly understands Delray and what our CRA has accomplished through the years. You know, at least in the House, this is somewhat of a runaway train, so it's really up to the Senate to kind of pull this back from the abyss, and like we have all, its merit doesn't carry the day. It's
Representation, fact was that it was misrepresented from our CRA. Would there make any sense at this point, or does it just, the comment was made and it's political at this point? What are your thoughts?
It's out there in the public realm. You know, I've seen it in various mediums, from YouTube to, I don't even know the other ones. So, you know, I've made the point publicly, at least in the Senate, unfortunately, we lost one of our, in the senator that represents us and has represented the city very well, and was viewed by his co-senators as someone that worked across the aisle. So there was some political capital there. We've lost that, and so you know, it's hard to gauge. I just, but I have made it clear to those that I've talked to that there's other arguments they could be making, but connecting our CRA to a terrible city commission decision of so many years ago is just it's disingenuous, it's dishonest, and I'm not sure there's anything we can do at this point. All right, thank you for that, David. All right, so moving on to number 2, update with Pasadena.
Yes, as a follow-up to City Commission meeting last week, and then our CRA board meeting last Thursday, you know, the negotiations with Pasadena are ongoing, and we did have a meeting last week just prior to the CRA board meeting. Those are ongoing, and we anticipate having the agreement available for the board's consideration at the February 8th meeting. At the meeting on January 25th, the board's decision was to basically table those for this particular time period and continue with the negotiations with Pasadena. And also, they directed staff to present to them a draft RFQ, RFP for all 3 blocks at the February 8th meeting. So we're working with one of our consultants on formulating that to get it to the board, and so they would basically entertain or consider that and discuss it at the February 8th meeting. The idea with regard to the RFQ slash RFP was just as far as, you know, we typically have issued RFPs. There are other ways to procure the redevelopment of properties. This might be a good option to present to the board for consideration. And so that'll be discussed at the February 8th meeting. So that's where we're at for the 3 blocks that are up there on the screen. The lavender color are basically the 3 acres that are in negotiation with Pasadena Capital. And that's more land than really was part of the initial RFP about 4 years ago. We have acquired additional land that will be included in each RFP.
The board has authorized negotiation of a purchase agreement with Pasadena concurrently with seeking RFQs from anybody and everybody?
No, they directed us to continue with the negotiation with Pasadena.
For a contract?
For a contract. And it directed staff to present to them at the next board meeting a draft RFQ, RFP. So we aren't soliciting at this time. The 30-day window on the letters, those were submitted, that 30-day window closed, and those are basically have been tabled at this point.
And was there any criteria for the RFQ? Was it just kind of who you are and what you bring to the table?
No, we're formulating that,
okay.
And it's sort of a 2-stage process. So what you do with the RFQ process is you're really dealing with those developers that have experience in a very similar circumstance, and it could prevent just an onslaught. And so out of those that would be selected, then they would respond to basically the RFP to redevelop the blocks. So that's what we will be presenting to the board and get some direction at the next meeting.
I'm still unclear as to the beauty pageant criteria. Is this open to anybody to submit an RFQ, or is this just limited to the letters of intent you've received?
No, it'd be open to anybody.
Okay, and how is that being advertised?
Well, at this point, we aren't even to the board to formulate the actual the RFQ. We're going to present that, a draft,
okay,
to discuss
got it.
at the February 8th meeting. It's not, the intent is not to present it to the board and then issue immediately, basically to get direction on the components of it and get some feedback.
And concurrent with that, you're negotiating a contract with Pasadena, presumably similar terms that you represented to the commission, that this would really be somewhat of a conduit contract assigned to Publix. Is that
correct? That is correct.
And what is just, could you brief the commission, David, on what are those, the salient terms of that, from date to close, conditions to close?
Mr. Duty's been negotiating that contract. I have not necessarily been privy to those specific discussions. I know that there are timeframes, a timeframe for commencement of construction, similar to what has been previously discussed. And it is our goal to have a final draft to present to the board at their May 8th meeting, so the board can decide, do they want to go with Pasadena or not?
So are you saying that there's to the 8th of May?
8th of February.
February. So
February, sorry.
basically, at that point in time, we're going to know whether or not Pasadena is willing to move forward or not.
Well, I'm sure they're willing to move forward. It's just a question of whether or not the CRA board wants to approve the contract and move forward.
So could you join in if, in fact, the CRA board decides that this is not what they want, the RFQ to the rest, tie it all together in the 3 parcels?
Yes, and that's one of the issues, because the property, as indicated on the slide, that Publix is considering using is not as large an area. So if the CRA is going to want to go out for the 600, 700, 800 block,
May I, Mr. Mayor?
Sure.
I'm a little frustrated and confused, and I've been trying to follow this in all the meetings that I've been able to attend. I missed the December meeting, and I think that might have been the place I should have been, but be that as it may. I have a question. What's going on? Why is it so hard to concentrate on developing West Atlantic Avenue as a block? Now, I tried to go back and reconstruct what's been going on. My first concern is that CRA was created over about 40 years ago to eliminate slum and blight. We have now developed and or overdeveloped areas east of Swinton. Number two, we are at the goal-setting meeting for the city in April. Once again, everyone seated on the on the City Commission agreed that we were going to set West Atlantic as our #1 priority to complete the downtown, make Atlantic Avenue one complete main street from I-95 to A1A. What has happened since April of last year? Uptown Equity signed in 2013, terminated in 2016. No RFP. An LOI comes. All of a sudden, everything stops. No RFP. We start concentrating on an LOI from a developer that has held us up for one more year with circumstances that I've been told, and we haven't even mentioned it, they seem adamant to not even want to put a shovel in the ground until December 2022. So if you add all this time up, let's say we give them that. We got everything on hold now, no RFP, until we decide if we're going to agree with that. And that's another month or two. So let's say 5 years if we give them that ability. You're going to now have 40 years of redeveloping and developing everything except West Atlantic, 1 year of waiting for an RFP or an LOI to develop, and now another 5 years. I'd like us to be open about what is before us. Why are we continuously 46 years and still waiting? If they don't like it, I was told at the meeting that I attended last Thursday, if they don't like it, we've wasted another 5 years, and we've lessened the parcels down to 2, and most developers would just die if they could have the 3. But we're going to maybe now just say, okay, you only have the 2. Are we waiting for more gentrification, loss of houses through wealth transfer, broken parcels to encourage large mixed-use projects? I'm very, very confused and don't understand. There has got to be some reason why we're even considering, since we know what your negotiations are. They don't seem to be moving.
Can I answer that?
Go ahead.
Ms. Johnson, Commissioner Johnson, at the meeting on our last Thursday meeting, I thought you were there, and I think you, well, at least the board itself, the commission, the CRA commission, we are very clear on what message we're sending to Pasadena. They either going to come back with something that's going to be more appealing, they can get the shove in the ground a lot quicker, or we're not going with them, period. I would not support anything other than what I suggested on Thursday, and hoping that my fellow commissioner would not support it either. I feel the frustration just like you do. The community feel the frustration just like you do. It is time for them to either come back with something that's going to be more attractive to what they had, other than that 2022. Other than that, there would be no Publix there in that lot,
And
as
so
far as I'm concerned.
we have 30 days to allow them to tell us.
No, they have to February the 8th to come back and bring something back to the next meeting. And then if it's not something that's going to be attractive and they think it's going to benefit the community and get something in the ground before 2022, then there will be no Publix, as far as I'm concerned.
And no Pasadena.
And no Pasadena.
Thank you.
Sure. First of all, I feel like deja vu again. Just after, we had a joint meeting shortly after the equity deal fell apart. And that was, the big discussion was that, do we go RFQ, do we go back and renegotiate with some of the original respondents? I think New Urban was one of them, and another one that responded to the original RFQ. Or do we go out for RFP, RFQ? And then we were supposed to, at that time, we basically, I remember as a commission said, we're gonna, you know, this is what we'd like, we're gonna leave it in CRA's hands. And my understanding was the CRA's RFP, and again, like Deputy Vice Mayor said, I echo her sentiments 100%. Here we are over a year later, and we literally have gotten, I can't say nowhere because there is some negotiations still going on with Publix, but that's one block. What frustrates me is the short-sightedness. So, okay, somebody came in, Publix, Pasadena, whoever it was, came in and said, we want this block. So we stopped everything, the NPs for the 7th and 8th block. We're not going to see, maybe we could finish something out on, you know, we have at least one block on the other side of the road. There's things we could be doing to stimulate, because once we got through this year of frustration with Publix, what did we learn? That we can't get anything done. And that's why they said no when it got to the real estate committee. So even right now, we put out, they put an offer in. We had an obligation to put a 30-day window for other people to make offers. That 30-day window showed us that there is a lot of interest in developing in that area. Yet we're going to find it whatever we can to do, it seems like, in my opinion, to make it drag out and make it even harder for anybody to actually do business in that area. I would think, like if I was on the CRA board, I'll tell you what my suggestion would have been is, of those 4 offers, did any of those offers include potentially the 7th and 8th block? And say, okay, Mr. Whoever that might have made these offers, we'll entertain your offer and start a 30-day negotiation with you for those 7th and 8th blocks. That opens up a new 30-day window of the day. So you end up getting, and if Publix sees that you have somebody at the table to develop 7th and 8th, that's we know from what they've told the mayor, that's going to motivate them to make those terms more pleasing. But because we're not doing anything on those blocks, they're probably going to come back with the same terms they gave us because they're not ready to make a commitment at this point. You know, the only reason I think they're even talking to us is because the mayor went out of his way to reach out to them so we didn't lose it completely. So to me, there are creative ways we can get things done, but it's like, okay, for 30 years, we've always just put out RFPs and RFQs, and that's what we're going to do it. You know, and we've got nothing done. Why not be creative this? We put the 30-day window, and maybe there's 10 developers that come in with some plans, and then you guys can pick and choose from those 10 options and go with the best one. But, you know, by just kicking it down the road, we're going to, like, I mean, I feel Deputy Vice Mayor Johnson's frustration 100% because I felt it for another year before her on the board, and I'm feeling it now, and I concur with her 100%. So I think there are, if we're creative, there are things we can do.
Thank you. Jeff, was the audio or video was available from our last meeting? Is that available? Because I know we was having issues.
I watched it.
Did you hear the comments in there?
Yeah. And the comments is that we want to move fast. I get that. We don't want to wait for Publix.
But also the other in the
was to go out for RFP. I'm saying that, right?
That's not.
That's what he just said.
That is not true.
No, it's
No?
That
What
is
was
not
the,
true.
so what
What
was
did
the,
Jeff just
what was the
say?
vote taken at that meeting as to do what to do with those offers, those letters of
Those
intent?
were tabled at that time.
Just
So that
table.
doesn't mean that
To the
they're
February
up
8th
to the
meeting.
Right, so that means they're not gone, so let's consider it.
Can I answer to? Well, just to answer to that one point, and then I'll ask to speak after. But just to that one point, if we had decided that night to direct staff to go back and negotiate with all 3 letters, because we had 3, not, I think there was a 4th, but
It was late.
we were discussing 3 that night at the meeting. We decided as a board that that would have taken up a tremendous amount of staff time in order to do the negotiations with Publix as well as those other LOIs at that moment. So we didn't want to disrupt what they were doing, Commissioner Katz, in order to get the Publix deal negotiated. We are still negotiating with them, and we're hoping that by February back. But in order to go out of, you go outside of that process, it does create some other challenges for staff and our CRA board. There's a process with an RFP
follow the
that's
same
in place
process.
for some reasons. But
I want to align with my fellow commissioners and applaud the Deputy Vice Mayor for bringing us back and looking at the history of how long we've had to wait, 30, 40 years. And it seems to me that the essence of what we want to look for is how quickly the various proposals can move forward. And I am very concerned about having to wait 5 years and have no assurance at the end of 5 years that Publix just doesn't give us our money back, with no interest on that money, by the way. I'm very concerned about that. And Jeff, I do want to address a word you used the word onslaught of proposals. I think that would be a good thing. This is the way we get into Delray off of I-95. It's our gateway. It should be our shining star. And there are people who do want to bid on it. I think we were lucky to get the 3 proposals, and I think they rushed to get those, I'm sorry, letters of interest. They were not proposals, I understand that. But they didn't have time to have that, and they weren't encouraged because the city and the CRA did not go back and talk to them. And I think this is a very inequitable relationship between all the discussions that staff and attorneys have had with Publix in Pasadena and no discussions with the well-intended letters of interest. There may be another 10 out there. And I think that our community, both the set and the city at large, deserves to see what the best offers are out there. And if we're busy negotiating with Pasadena and Publix, and we've quote-unquote tabled the other 3, I don't see that as inequitable at all, and I also don't see that as best for the city and for the set. I hope everybody read through these. They were pretty short, so we should be able to. But they talked about building on the history of the set. They talked about housing for the set. They talked about supporting startup businesses. I think they all guaranteed that there would be a supermarket in the mix, and they wouldn't ask us to wait 5 years. They talked about putting a shovel in the ground in 2 years. So I'm really confused, Mr. Mayor, of why we have this inequitable relationship, and we are not dealing with the letters that have been put before us, particularly since at least 2 and probably 3 of them are local developers that know our city, that have been involved in one way or another with the set, and we know them in turn. It's not some organization from Ireland. It's not some large corporate enterprise that is just going to put a stamped template in place that may or may not fit into our community. So I'm concerned with the way this is going.
Well, just to clarify one point, the city has really no, you mentioned something at the outset of your comments, and in general, I agree with what I think the common theme here would be frustration at the pace of both execution, something that actually is successful, but in the current context, something with such uncertainty is what has been outlined with Publix in Pasadena. But to be clear, the city doesn't have authority, jurisdiction, if you will, to negotiate an LOI. Frankly, there was nothing, and I mentioned this publicly, in these LOIs, whether rushed or methodically produced, that was compelling to me as a developer that has probably written hundreds of these things or read twice as many. They're all altruistic. They all say the right things. Having said that, I think you open this up, as you've said, and as others, I think you will get quite a bit of interest. But until that happens, the way it's been proceeding is in a very disjointed way. And I think part of that, to be perfectly candid, is whether you're going to let this be market-driven or community-driven, because rarely does it work when it's both. And if you want a better indication of that, you can look at the history of West Atlantic. I think that the community needs to really decide how much they want a grocery store to be an integral part of this development. Because I think what you're going to find is that is going to constrain, bootstrap, however you want to describe it, the world, the universe of possibilities for this, that some of you may have considered very carefully, some we may have not thought of at all. And until that process is opened up to those that universe of possibilities, we're not going to know. Look, I agree, nobody is going to be comfortable with allowing Publix or anybody, Nordstrom's, to have a 5-year deal time frame. I agree with what Morris said, and I think others. Not now, not after waiting so long. And if they can come back with something that gives you that assurance that they're going to start in a time frame that you find acceptable, you've got a home run. With Publix as anchoring those other 2 blocks. But barring that, I mean, I certainly wouldn't be hanging my hat on the 3 letters of intent that were submitted. I support you going out to the development community criteria, and I make this point very clearly. It was the CRA board that recommended something other than equity. It was your financial advisor that recommended a deal other than equity. I'm missing somebody. There was somebody else in there that was not recommending the equity. And what happened? You hitched your wagon to equity, and 5 years later we got nothing. And part of that was because that decision was community-driven rather than data-driven. And my suggestion is I won't be here for that iteration, but I would hope that you would pay a lot of attention to what data is telling you. And there's a lot of data out there, rather than, maybe some needs that can be handled other ways. Yes, Kathy.
So I appreciate your comments, Carrie, because some of what I think I heard you say was that you were finding some reason of how we came to some of our conclusions. I was not on the board when they made the decision for the RFP for equity. I was on the board when we had to, negate the contract and cancel it. It wasn't a good feeling at that time. And I know that we've been criticized and we've had hard conversations back and forth. When we come to these meetings, I appreciate the feedback. I don't appreciate being criticized for things because we are trying to do it right. And when I tell you that there needs to be a process, there needs to be a process. When it is a great thing that we have the letters of interest, but when we ended the equity deal at that time, as a board, we knew that it took some time, but hard work takes time, and it was community driven through that process. We now have a solid plan in front of us that works. We now have to implement it. We're now at that starting point. We can get the job done if we have support that we know what direction you want us to go in. We did stop and start negotiating with Publix. At the time, everyone, including everyone up here, thought it was a great idea, because I remember sitting in those meetings where you all sat across from us and said, go for it. We want Publix. I do not support any agreement with Publix at this point that's going to take 5 years down the road to start. I feel they're done. So we had no choice but to table in that last meeting for a few more weeks those discussions until we had the exact information. So we can be criticized for that, but at the same time, it was the right thing to do. As far as the letters of interest that are in our hands, we can, as a board, in that next meeting, we now gave ourselves options. So instead of saying no, we're going to just make those LOIs go away, we decided to table them, so they're now an option on the table when we meet. So we're not wasting time. So we can continue to move forward in that next meeting as to whether we deal with Publix or not. We'll know. If we'll be advertising for 30 days, we probably will get more letters at that point. We can go that route, or we could choose at that point to do an RFP process that, with some requirements that gets the right person to us. There's a couple ways that we can do it, but our board's we're gonna have to kind of vet that out. But we're not, by any means, I do not think that we're stalling or that we're doing anything. And we did it in the order that the plan was presented. It's down now, we're now at that point. I don't see how we would have done it any faster.
Kathy, I didn't mean to criticize the effort of the board last week. I thought they did a yeoman's job in trying to move this forward. But I am worried that we're not giving an equitable chance to others. And I'm also worried when we use the word RFP rather than either RFQ or invitation to negotiate. An RFP, in my mind, is going to take too long, and it's going to be too prescriptive, and it's going to take unto itself it seems to me that what we want to do is open the doors and listen to what some of the opportunities are and what people can do for us, for the community, for the set. But if we dot every I and cross every T in an RFP and it's 150 pages long and it takes a year to do, we're just back into that same old grind that's going to take forever to do and come up with a suboptimal approach, I think.
I agree.
If I may,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Petrolia.
if I may, I totally agree with you, Commissioner Balistreri. I think that, this board our board hasn't been in your shoes. So we do not know exactly what you're dealing with, and I think your explanation clears it for me. I think that it would have been great had this meeting been planned maybe just after the 8th, because I think that then there would be some answers to the frustration that everybody seeming to be moving forward. And I think that maybe you'll have a better idea after the 8th, where you've given, Pasadena the opportunity to come back before you, because at that point in time, you will be moving forward. But I think you're exactly right. To have moved forward while you're negotiating, you don't know where you're going to be after the 8th. So it just seems like it was really kind of a little bit too soon. So I just want you to know that I feel you, and I agree.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask? Jeff, would you give us, or can you give us, without violating any particular negotiating tactics, and can you give us a status of what you think is going on with the negotiations?
With regard to the negotiations, we do have timeframes within the agreement that they need to adhere to, as far as, submitting for site plan, getting site plan approval, the timeframe when Publix would close on the property. There's, we're working through the details as far as trying to get it moved, that timeframe moved up as far as construction. And in the contract, commencing construction means having the footers in the ground. So just for that means you're building the foundation by December 31st, 2022. So, but that's getting into the weeds with regard to construction sequencing. But in any case, we're trying to move that up. So there's other details.
Didn't your board give you any direction? I mean, I've heard now from, I think, not everybody's here, but 2 of your board members. Was there no direction given in terms of what that linchpin issue was in terms of timing? This is it? I mean, we're only given, so what is that?
Why continue?
That's what Shirley's
Why
asking.
continue to negotiate if they have consistently said we cannot get a shovel in the ground until December, when Mayor Lickstein said we will move heaven and earth to get the Publix here? And I'm beginning to wonder if that was probably their problem. They took you that we'll wait to.
They thought I had those powers.
Yes, that you could
but-
hold it up.
End of
But
day.
now
No,
they seem stuck.
But did you get guidance on what that date out?
No. We know that Pasadena has heard the CRA board as far as their concerns with respect to the outside date. So as part of the negotiations, we are impressing upon them the CRA board's concerns regarding that commencement of construction. And we continue our efforts to see if we can get that date moved. And when the agreement is finalized, because the negotiation's still ongoing, we will know, our board will know, and then they can make the decision as to whether or not that date is appropriate or not.
And I'm
That's
sorry.
the best answer I can give today.
So there, you have a drop-dead date to answer Ms. Johnson's questions. You will have those timings, whatever that is, by what date?
It's anticipated that the agreement would come to the board on February 8th. In order to present the agreement to the board, that Publix or Pasadena will have had to sign off on that agreement.
And
So
that
we will know what they, what their position is. They're either going to sign it or they're not before the February 8th meeting.
Including the real estate committee that pulled out
Well,
last time?
that's still a condition of the agreement.
Well, we received on December 1st a letter from the real estate committee, and that's the condition that was tied to the real estate committee's approval. So we're trying to move that up through the negotiation. So the real estate committee has approved it, subject to it.
Has approved what, Jeff?
The project at the location on the 600 block.
The site only. See, I'm getting, when you're making the presentation, we're more concerned right now with
Right.
whatever the site is. They've gotten pre-approval, tried to give them pre-approval in order to get them to come. So to me, that's a done. It's the timing that we seem to be hung up on.
Right.
And they have had almost a month, and they haven't moved.
Since December 14th.
December 14th, they've had over a month, and they haven't moved. So why are we still negotiating? What are we negotiating?
We're moving to, and so.
But we have no leverage.
Well, I wouldn't
we
say
still
that.
own
I
the
mean,
property.
they know that there's other people interested. But I guess what I'm trying to understand, when you say negotiating, what are you actually negotiating? Or are you just waiting for them to revise a proposal? I mean, is there back and forth dialogue where they say one date and you say no? And they give you another date and you say maybe?
There is back and forth dialogue,
On that date?
yes.
And that, I mean, are you Grand Canyon apart? Are you?
I don't know about the Grand Canyon part, but it's not as close as we'd like to be. Let's put it that way.
So we-
Mr. Mayor, I think the bottom line is the board gave clear direction, okay, for negotiation to continue and bring it back February 8th. On February 8th, it will be disclosed to the board, the whatever negotiating they've been doing, and it'll be presented to the board, and the board will have to make a decision on how we're going to move forward. I mean,
Okay.
can't get anything else tonight.
No, I get it. I get it.
It wasn't asked for tonight.
It's coming back February 8th, and that's it. That's all
I
you
got
get.
it. You're right.
And
There were some issues, though, that we raised in terms of what else was in there besides the date. One was a no-flip provision, so they cannot flip it at $6 million to somebody else.
Right, we have the right to repurchase.
I realize that, but do they have the right to resell?
Well, it wouldn't
You
be
know,
right. It would be.
what'll happen is, it depends after you're talking about after the construction, after close.
No,
It's not
before.
prior to,
No.
no, they cannot.
Prior to
flip
the
it
5 years.
Prior to that timeframe. That's.
So
that's
there's
not-
legal language in there that would prevent
Yes.
them
Yes,
from selling it.
yes.
Okay, and the second thing was, what were the requirements that we as a city had to meet in order for them to say, yes, there's been enough development that they will move ahead and put a shovel in the ground?
There's not a requirement in there as far as that's concerned. I think that's why it comes to the point where we get it to the board and get the direction and the direction on the RFP. Pasadena, we're getting ready to put out, or whatever the decision is on the LOIs at that time.
No, that,
So-
I'm sorry, but
so
that
that-
wasn't my question. My question was, what are the thresholds, what are the accomplishments that we have to do in order for them to say, yes, they're going to move forward?
There are no city requirements per se, if that what you're referring to?
No, I think we had a conversation, and I think, and if I may, Commissioner, just to step in, there was a trigger you know, a trigger to have them have to move forward, not just to wait until 5 years. We were talking about there has to be something that comes along so that in the event that there is development happening, something would trigger them to have to move forward rather than just continuing to wait and sit on property for 5 years down the road. Do we have anything like that that you're working on?
They have a time frame to get site plan approval. That contract can be terminated at that time if they don't follow through within that time frame.
Well,
We're still not getting to the crux of this.
Let me just jump in for a second. Excuse me, I apologize for being late. I was teaching a class. I understand that the commission has some concerns and some things that they would like to see in the agreement. I think at this point, asking staff to craft the specifics that address your concern is probably not the best way to go about it. I would recommend that whatever concerns that you have, you give that to your city manager. To pass on to our executive director and our attorney. So as we continue this negotiation process, and it comes back to us as a group, we can weigh the value and see where we're either in agreement or not, or we can be worked out or not. But asking specific questions to our executive director about a contract that is in negotiation, point, is not really, as Commissioner Cox, going to get you much more tonight. I think your concerns are valid, and they should be. I understand that. I watched the last meeting.
The city manager and the executive director are well aware of those questions. They were asked 2 weeks ago.
Okay, and we continue, as our executive director said, that we're negotiating, and I think the clear direction tonight is to address the particular concerns of the commissioners as the negotiation process continues, and as we continue to take a look at what they come back with.
Jeff,
And I just had one third one, if I
I
may.
want to help you out. Jeff, could you explain to the commission, okay, the normal site plan approval process and some built-in obligations that the developer has along the way to the 5-year goal? Because it's built-in obligations.
That's not my question.
That's not the
question.
question.
I think the question is whether or not there's anything that, if the city does something, is that date going to be moved forward, whether it's approving development.
That's not the question. How many housing units do we have to build in 5 years?
There's nothing in the agreement related.
Okay.
No.
So say, well, you haven't done what we asked 5 years from now, and give us our money back. It's a moving target, thank
In
you.
theory, if they don't commence construction by a certain date, as defined in the agreement, then the CRA would have the right to repurchase the property. And that's the date that we're trying to work and negotiate.
And that's going to be less than 5 years is basically what you're saying.
So,
And if I understand, Commissioner, that's not sufficient, I think is the point you're trying to get at. That is not sufficient on our side.
And we're negotiating the agreement. It's anticipated the agreement will be in final form to present to the board in plenty of time for them to look at prior to the meeting on February 8th. At that point in time, you'll be able to review it.
Interest.
Understood.
High interest.
Marker.
And I just, one other closing comment. If it is the board's decision not to proceed with Publix, I think it would be just a tragic, huge missed opportunity to focus on the 3 letters of intent that you've received and not open this up to the universe of possibilities. And I agree with Mr. Chard, an RFP now is not the right way to go about it. And I think that process is going to become in the RFP I think I can see, it's not hard to see this repeating what's already been done in that in process to attract what your board, who and what your board finds compelling and can get you in the ground sooner. But, and I don't want to mischaracterize, Kathy, what you said, but I agree. You're gonna take this as far as you can with Publix. It's either thumbs up, thumbs down. If it's thumbs up, great. If it's thumbs down, don't, I disregard whatever you've received and come up with a process that you guys feel like can get you clarity soonest, and that's probably not an RFP.
No, and it's probably just, it's also probably, we know there's interest, so we may be able to put, normally when we would put out an RFP or an RFQ, we would advertise it for 60 days or whatever. Maybe our timeframe's gonna be a lot shorter because at this point, we know there's interest. So there's probably a few different things, but I did challenge our board and our staff in the last meeting to think late in this case, because we could do our Q combination, but I think that's why Jeff's bringing it back to us with some different ideas so that we can entertain that to solve some of those problems.
And I think Commissioner Kostarfin has talked about really advertising this, where there is a press release and a meeting with the press so that the Sun Sentinel and Miami Herald and others know that we are open for business and we want to find the very best out there.
Which,
No.
No.
And I would use a national, I'm sorry.
it's on
this
the
is not a
rules, that's the only reason.
Just
in the rules,
I would say that in and of itself is very limiting. I mean, there's national companies that for short money can put this out. This is an international location now.
Absolutely.
And to limit yourself to South Florida possibilities, if that's the route you take, I just would encourage you very.
It as an RFP. I would say on February the 8th, when you present to the board, and this would be something I think would show that the CRA is being proactive, is two RFQs that ready that night. If they say yes to Publix, there's an RFQ with 2 blocks. If they say no to Publix, there's an RFQ with 3 Publix. And on February the 9th, you have that press conference already scheduled, already advertised, and it's going to be the same discussion. Your only difference is going to be, it's going to be 2 blocks to accompany Publix, or it's going to be 3 blocks, go out there and do it. But there's no reason to keep waiting. Let's see, and okay, give me a couple months and I'll go, look at the RFQ. Like I said, we had this discussion over a year ago. We've done nothing with those 2 blocks, so.
All right, something's going to happen. I feel it in the air. Just, just as a parting kind of editorial comment, we just kind of went through the set transformational plan, and I believe, I can't speak for everybody, but aside from all of the hard work that went into that, and I think transformational is the right word. That was it's going to, I think transformational is the right word, but I think it's fair also to say that given the huge success of our city CRA through the years, through the decades, a lot of board members, a lot of staff that deserves a lot of credit for hugely important and relevant projects that have been accomplished. Unfortunately, we will all be judged by West Atlantic, and the catalyst for the transformation plan is West Atlantic, and I think everything will feed off that success and scale up from there. Similarly, I think we will be limiting how that is by our inability to get West Atlantic some real, well, that's a little complicated, but I think you just got yourself back in the weeds of what you, of the RFP.
I was picking up from your point on the amount of work that's gone into it.
Look, I think anybody that's going to respond to this has to be familiar with the community and the community needs, and you've just kind of embodied that, codified it by putting that plan together. But again, it's so critically important for everybody that as West Atlantic goes, Delray goes. So, any event, we're going to move on. Thank you for your efforts there. I think we'll keep our fingers crossed that something comes of the aid. All right. So, status of the CIP, first quarter report, Jeff.
All right. Before we get started, I just want to acknowledge a couple folks, and that's Begonia Crane in the Works Now Department. and Kevin Matthews, our project planner. These two been involved in her role, and it's really a partnership as we've been moving these forward. I'm going to look at this here. So, just to get this started, just some recapping on completed projects as we moved into the end of the last fiscal year, moving forward. There were a couple alley projects completed, beautification in the southwest 2nd Street, Osceola Park, which has been discussed for many years. That is moving forward with regard to the design. There is a project that's moving forward at Atlantic Avenue and 95. The design of those plans is underway, which actually that project is supposed to start in 2018. And then Northwest 12th Avenue, which was completed last year. So these projects ready to begin. These are, as you see the map that you have before you, there's those that are highlighted that are carried forward that occurred last year moving forward to this year. The orange basically are being carried over from last year, and then the green and the purple and the blue are moving into this fiscal year. We're new projects in this budget cycle. So as moving forward, there were pedestrian crosswalks in East Atlantic Avenue where that project's moving forward. Plan to start construction in May. There's other project in Northeast 3rd Avenue and 3rd Street where the city's finalizing the agreements with the property owners that would be ready potentially for construction in next fiscal year. And then various sidewalks where the bid, within the CRA district, the plans were designed, projects were out to bid, and they're currently in the bids are under review at this time. There are also projects that are 100% design and getting ready to move forward. Some of those are alley projects in the northwest, southwest neighborhood that are currently designed. We're working with the utility companies with the relocation of those poles, and actually there are 2 to 5 alleys that are out to bid at this time and anticipate additional going out a little bit later this year. There's been a project in there for, I don't know, since Southeast 1st Street was converted to two-way, which is this mast arm at 1st Street and Swinton. That's been in the plan for a number of years. And so the county and FPL were at that point where that project's going to be able to move forward also. And there one more as far as on Southeast 4th Avenue, the design of those improvements are adjacent to the IPIC project are ongoing. I believe city staff are currently in the design phase for those improvements, basically from Atlantic to Southeast 2nd Street. And again, those are projects that have been in the pipeline and are moving forward. So I just wanted to introduce this part of it, and then I'm going to turn from there.
Can I just ask for clarification on this map? We've got color-coded, completed, ready to begin, and waiting and also green and underway in this PowerPoint, and we've got different colors in this. What's the difference?
The city created the PowerPoint map without having the map in front of me. The CRA created the project map, so I didn't have that map with me when I did the PowerPoint presentation, or I would have made it more exact.
All right, because on this it says proposed projects fiscal 17 and 18, which to me, does that mean these are approved and appropriated projects?
Yes, all of those are. Those are budgeted this fiscal year. And part of the interlocal agreement between the city and the CRA that was approved the end of last year.
Okay. Thanks, Missy. Go on.
Okay, Okay, so now that we've started to really clear the deck of a lot of those old projects that have been hanging around for a lot of years, we're getting ready to begin on the projects that we have currently funded for this fiscal year. One of them is Pompey Park Master Plan, which was technically funded last year, but we didn't get started with it until this year. That project, the plan development is ongoing. We're getting ready to start with our community meetings. There's a lot of community input that will be included in that. We have agreed to replace 3 large HVAC units at Old School Square that serve the field house and the theater. The bid opening for that is in 2 days. So once we open the bid, those units will have to be constructed. We'll probably be installing them by late May at the latest. The downtown roundabout trolley, we had some unfortunate news with our trolley this last week, and the company that's been operating it is going out of business. So we'll be looking for moving up our pilot project and looking at ways to keep that transportation process going in the next week. One of the things that the CRA had funded for this year is a level-by-level parking garage counting system. As you go into the Old School Square garage, you'll be able to look up and see how many parking places are available per floor, so that you know what floor you're headed for, so that you can go in and grab your parking space. That's ready to go out for advertisement for proposals. License plate recognition, also at the Old School Square garage. We have all of the cameras have been installed. They are working 3/4 of the way. License plate recognition is a very complicated IT maneuver. They have to talk to the meters, they have to talk to the park mobile application, they have to talk to the passport application that does the citations, and then all of that has to download back to the parking attendant's handheld unit. So it's a complicated procedure to get all of that programmed. The restrooms at Hilltopper and concession stand, we're looking at location for those, and we are in the process of developing a scope of work for design of that. And we are in the process of designing a new building for storing our 100-foot Christmas tree on the Swinton Operations Complex campus. So 2 of the bigger projects that we have underway currently are the roadway construction in the southwest neighborhood on Southwest 3rd Court, 4th Street, 6th Street, and 7th Avenue. We had our first neighborhood meeting with those folks, and they brought to, oh, am I forgetting to, sorry. Thank you. See what a great team we are? Anyway, we had our first neighborhood meeting with those folks, and they brought to us a number of spirited suggestions on what they would like to see included in their project. A few of those things we did not have included in the original scope of the project. One of those was landscaping. They're not looking for the kind of landscaping that we've seen in other places, which is tall and lush. They just want some nice low-level landscaping that will not affect sight lines over the years and will be easy for the city to maintain. And we're working with the consultant to add that in. They were also interested in traffic calming measures, and we're also going to be adding that into the scope of work with our consultant. So another thing that we've done, we have an independent website. The consultant has established a website for this place for those folks who are not able to attend the public meeting. They have an opportunity to go onto the website, see all the progress on the project as it's ongoing. They can also make regular regular requests for information or just comments on how the different features are going. Another one of the things that we've added into this project at their request is lighting in the alleyways, which we have not done before. Now, this project, I will manage expectations here. This project is scheduled to begin construction this year. There is a potential with the new design elements that we've added in that we may be very close to the end of this fiscal year or even roll over into the next fiscal year before we're actually ready to begin construction. So that one's going to be close. The biggest project that we're doing right now is the Osceola Neighborhood Improvement Project. We've also got our website up and running for this project. It is it's OsceolaParkProject.com if you want to go online and take a look at it. This project is a complete neighborhood project. We're looking at everything from all of the pipes underground to the top of the street lights over the top of the streets. We have we've completed surveying and geotechnical investigations. We polled the community about where there were traffic issues in their neighborhood. They came and marked on the map where they felt that there were traffic issues in the neighborhood. In the meantime, we were actually out in the neighborhood collecting data on where traffic issues actually are. And I have to say the community was right on target. They put their X's on the map exactly at the same place that our data showed things needed to be. So if you go to Osceola neighborhood, if you go on 4th Street, right at the intersection of 4th Street and 4th Avenue, the community had asked us to put a roundabout. There is a temporary roundabout out there right now so that the community has a chance to look at the kinds of traffic calming measures that they asked for, to see how they feel about them after they've actually been put in the neighborhood. There's also a couple of places where we put in temporary chicanes, which means that you make a swerve to that calms traffic when the road is not straight, when you have to make a curve. And another couple of places where we're trying out some speed cushions. So this is a twofold process. One, it gives the neighborhood a chance to decide if they like what we put out there. Two, it gives us a chance to see how they're going to get around what we put out there, so we know what else we need to do. So there are a few projects that are on our list for this year that we have not started on yet. One of those is the Merritt Park Playground and Port-in-Place surfacing. That is a project that is so many things to do. That is a project that is planned for this summer, that the Parks and Recreation Department will be managing. The Catherine Strong Park Master Plan is following right on the heels of completing the overall park master plan. Reclaimed water system area 9. Right now we're looking at whether we want to replace water, potable water and sewer lines in that same area for inclusion in the project. Once those investigations have been completed, then we'll be embarking on the design for that project. And then reconstruction, there's new design that will be coming in the set, and we're in the process. Those are marked on your overall map in green, both down in this area and up here near City Hall. And that RFQ is in the process of development. And that is all we have for you this evening.
Thanks, Missy.
Ask Jeff questions.
Yeah. Commissioner Petrolia?
Yeah, I have a couple. The roadway redesign in certain areas. Trying to see where this is close to City Hall. There's been some reach out about the cut-throughs to from Lake Ida over to City Hall area. And this area also has a school close by. So, I mean, I know I reported that, and I know that there was some some devices put there to find out, you know, what's actually going on. Is that roadway that, what is it that we're actually doing over there? Just curious.
It'll be the same kind of project as what we're doing now on Southwest 3rd Court, 4th, 6th, and 7th, where we'll look at the traffic calming, we'll look at the lower kind of landscaping, reconstructing the roadway, because all of these roads are still under 40 on our pavement indicator. We're still working on that goal of the commission from several years ago, trying to catch up on getting those up to speed. So those roadways are predominantly marked like that. If you take a look at the map, they're rather disconnected. So they're in the development of the scope of work for that. I would say that at making connections and where we've identified other problems, we will look at finding solutions to the other problems as well.
Well, if you can speak at least with the city manager, because if in fact any of those roads are the through roads that we're getting calls on, and for good reason, maybe there's a way to be able to add, you know, that to it, so that, you know, it just makes sense if you're over there doing whatever. Any chance, and I don't know, this might come through parks, but I know that there's been a lot of slides because the slides are so hot. I don't know if that's in your purview, if that's really a parks, but just curious.
I believe that it is in parks, and the last that I remember the discussion about this, and I'm jumping in the Wayback Machine, they were looking into getting some price quotes for putting the sail over the playground equipment there. Right, exactly. And we were waiting for all of the Veterans Park has a master plan that's coming also, that will be looking at rebuilding some of the facilities there.
In the meantime, though, just because of the fact that, you know, obviously we want the kids to be able to play on the park, and that it gets hot, it would be kind of smart. And then the final thing is the lighting over at Catherine Strong Park. That a lot of that's been shot out, and, you know, it's very, very dark over there. And for purposes of things that really shouldn't be happening over there happening, I think that's something that we need to look at.
Okay.
I think that's a city issue. The question also that I have.
Some smaller unit replacements.
Okay.
These are 30, 40, and 50-ton units. They're very, very large.
Is that the $463,000 that's going to cost to do that?
It's in the name. We haven't got the bids back yet. What we have, the engineer's opinion of probable cost is in the neighborhood of $380,000, and then we had some other money in there for some other types of maintenance activity at Old School Square.
Okay. And the beautification interchange at 95-145, what was that for again?
That's for decorative lighting to match the rest of the lighting along West Atlantic Avenue.
The design associated that the city had to do as far as utility relocations. So we probably aren't going to use the whole 145, but that's what was budgeted. But it includes that in moving at 12th and Atlantic, the street lights.
Okay. And then finally, the level-by-level parking garage count, 200,000. Is that actually the system, or is that just figuring out what the system's going to be?
That's actually the system.
Good. Because I was going to say. All right. And one other thing, OsceolaPark.com, or is it OsceolaProject.com? I'm sorry.
OsceolaParkProject.com.
Oh, okay, there you go. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Commissioner Katz has to leave at 7, so.
Sure. Just briefly, I concur with Commissioner Petroli about the shades. I've been asking for those for 2 years now since those went up. And then I was told it was in last year's budget. Doesn't seem like it should be that difficult to cover those. The question also on that, the count system, 200,000, is that both garages? Is that,
No, that's just Old School Square Garage.
and this is so that we know at 4 o'clock essentially when cars are coming in, it's the
And so all the time, as people come and go from the garage, they'll be able to see, right now, if you come during the daytime, there's a lot of empty spaces. It's not
Right.
really a requirement. On the weekends and during special events, it would be nice for people, it's a measure to keep them from being able, from just around endlessly looking for a parking space. They'll be able to know as they come in how many parking spaces are available in the garage and where they are.
So we'll tell them what floors they're on, and will it coordinate with the app? So if I pull in downtown and I pull up the Park Mobile app, will it tell me there's 100 spaces or 10 spaces in the Old School Square Garage?
It is supposed to, it's supposed to talk to each other like that, and I'm gonna.
I mean, I know that
say
technology's
we'll get
out there, so
I know these things, getting
Well,
these things.
Right. Well, my
programmed
concern is that
complicated.
if we're going to invest that type of money in technology, that we're getting the right stuff, because it's already out there. I mean, I could reserve a spot at Fort Lauderdale Airport right now and know I'm going to spot E3. So,
Well, one of the things that we've done on this project is enlisted the assistance of some of the parking folks in Hollywood who have a system like this already. They're going to be helping us on our selection committee, and they're also working with us on the designing the scope of work.
great job on the Osceola Park. I know that's really starting to move forward, and I think there's even one of those chicanes, is that what it's pronounced, in front of
It's a
Jim's house,
chicane,
right?
yeah.
Or something over there, right?
It's roundabout.
Oh, it's a roundabout, okay. But lots of feedback on that, on those.
Yeah, there are some people who are not overly fond of it, and I've watched a couple of folks who just don't know what to do when they get to one of those, so.
Right, so maybe some education, I guess, to go along with that. But, no, I think it's great that we're following through these commitments on the capital improvements.
Thank you. I would say on the roundabout that it does constrain the traffic, and I saw a huge semi-trailer truck try to get around that. So I think you kind of have to link.
Well, one of the things that we have actually installed cameras in that intersection so that we can see all of the issues that people do have with it.
Good.
But also because it was important to us to get a handle on the pedestrian and bicycle traffic through there and exactly how they deal with that kind of issue. So some of the folks in the neighborhood were uncomfortable with that at first, but we're honestly not watching them. We're just watching the
But I think
people.
there is some linkage issues with other traffic calming
Right.
elements as well. When we did Northwest 12th Avenue, it was 1 week before Irma came through, unfortunately, and those trees were impacted. Do we have maintenance contracts for the first 2 years or so that they can be uprighted again and staked again?
Yeah, all of our projects come with a 1-year warranty on death of plants for the first year, so the year. And city staff usually does a lot of the maintenance and oversight of those projects during the first year to get a handle on what is involved with it, so that they can have landscape contracts in place.
Well, I'm just saying it was so beautiful, and then 1 week later, trees were down and ties were snapped and so forth. And so there is a process.
There is a process.
Okay. You mentioned on alleys that there was actually going to be lighting in them, which was a
That
great...
was a neighborhood choice. We posed the question to them because we were talking about septed type of planning issues, and the neighbors, they brought up that they were scared. They were afraid of what was going on in their alleyways. We asked them, do you want lighted alleyways? And pretty much unanimously, they said they did.
Well, I just wanted to compliment you. That's a great step forward, and hopefully you will also consider permeable alleyways.
We are everywhere that we can use permeable pavement or permeable pavers or turf block even. We are doing that because we cannot continue to pave all of our alleys. We're creating a stormwater management issue we will not be able to manage.
That's precisely my point, that right now, the water percolates down rather than flushing out the end.
Exactly, and we have wonderful soils for that. We just have to recognize the blessing we have and make sure that we don't plan ourselves out of it.
And hopefully there's also some landscaping going to be done in there. There's not just going through and putting in curb and gutter without some sort of perhaps xeriscape landscaping that can survive without maintenance.
In the alleys?
We can.
We'll look at that.
And
There's pretty
just say okay.
They're pretty constrained right-of-ways, but if we can find a way.
Vines don't take up.
Okay.
So the last thing I have is, you said in passing that you were moving up the pilot with regard to the trolleys, because what exactly does that mean?
Well, we're looking at a pilot. One of the things that the CRA graciously provided us funding for this year was to look at alternative to the trolley system or an add-on to the trolley system, where we'll be looking at different types of point-to-point transportation that will give us, in coordination with the set transformation plan, that will be able to give, maybe we'll have a transportation system in place to get people to it.
But in the near term, if the trolleys are gone, is the pilot moved up to provide point-to-point transportation?
I have to tell you that there may be a lapse in service because of the lack of notice that we've got, but I cannot foresee really, if you're asking my opinion, I cannot foresee an instance where we will be completely without some form of transportation from the Tri-Rail station into the downtown area, whether that be a trolley, whether that be a tram, whether that be some form of electric vehicle. What that looks like in the future is something that we still have to hash out. But there are a number of people who depend on that Tri-Rail to trolley for getting to work and back every day.
Many of them are service personnel on Atlantic Avenue.
Correct.
Thank you.
Shirley? Thank you. Very good presentation. Thank you. I have quite a few questions, and I know the hour is getting late, and I see everybody rolling their eyes. So, and the CRA hasn't weighed in yet, so I'll try and make it short. There's lots of questions. We could have done
That was just Jim charged landscape in the alleys.
That's why I like to go before
Hey,
him.
he didn't ask me for a bioswale this
Okay.
time.
Yeah. I'd like to leave a little time for the CRA commissioners to weigh in on some of this. I'm sure they have comments or questions. I'm concerned about the Pompeii master plan. I know that there is a new activity now that everyone seems to have gotten crazy about, pickleball, and it appears to have come up against, from what I understand, when you had the meeting at Pompeii Park. I believe I was at a city commission meeting and I could not attend. I really wished I could have, because there was talk about removing the basketball courts from Pompeii Park.
Not going to happen.
And I don't know if it was a presentation or a thought or someone threw it out there.
I will
But just,
say
and
this about that. We were very careful in the selection process of this consultant to be certain that they would be someone who could connect with the community and make sure that they heard what the community said and bring those issues forward. So, and Ms. Yvonne served on the committee with us. I think that thrown out in these master planning processes, when you do community charrettes, people come up with a lot of different ideas, and the best ideas will filter their way out toward the end. The cream will rise to the top.
Okay. I just know that the group is very powerful. They are very good at sending out emails. And I don't know that the advocates for keeping the basketball courts are as agile. And so I would just like to have it be known that.
I think we also have some ideas for other places for pickleball courts.
Very
so
good. I'm glad to hear that.
We'll make sure that everybody has a place to recreate.
Great. I'm so happy to hear that. Veterans Park has a shuffleboard, which was the rage in the 50s before some of you were even born. So shuffleboard isn't even, some of young people in here don't even know what that is. So hopefully pickleball won't go down that alley. For the trolleys, I am, for one, very happy that they have pushed us maybe, 5 months sooner than we might have intended to be. They block traffic, they pollute. I am so happy that I was not on the commission that agreed to do that, because I just don't think I would have voted for it. It's a novel idea, but the implementation was really bad. I like the level-by-level software for the parking garage. Little confusing. I tried it at Fort Lauderdale, and because I was in a hurry. And in the garage now, I don't see signs posted. And the little parking meter, we all know there's parking because we live here and we know that there is. If I were visiting, I would know that there's a parking meter that I need to insert money into. I would get out of my vehicle and trot over to the stairway or the elevator and go about my merry way, come back and find a ticket on my car. So I'd like a little bit more notification. I don't know how.
There's a really big banner as you pull in.
Yes, but I'm so busy trying to get in.
And that's, yeah. So we'll look at maybe
something that
in a couple of places within the garage.
As I'm exiting that floor, I should have some notification. Have you paid for your parking or something? There's a parking meter arrow, something.
Okay.
And it's very simple to use, believe me. I'm one of those who to hear. I don't know, Mr. Lozier, what other, you and I met about the other needs for that facility, and it's mandatory. And the Christmas tree storage, I had hoped that, and this is my last, I hope that Mr. DeJesus would be here, because he told me that there was already a facility that would accommodate it. But now I'm understanding that we're building something to accommodate it?
It has been accommodated at the old train depot for many, many years. And that is where it is sitting right now, waiting to be
Exposed.
It's not exposed.
No, it's not exposed.
It's inside a warehouse. It's safe. Everything is. I'm not going to jeopardize our brand new tree.
I hope not.
But the Santa houses are still out in the weather and exposed. In the new building, there will be room inside the building for all of the Santa houses, for all of the animatronics that go inside, for the tree.
Are those exposed? The
animatronics, no, they're stored in the warehouse under the parking garage right now. So, but right now there's a lot of little pieces in a lot of different places. We're going to make one special spot for it.
And do you know where that's going to be?
Yes, it will be on the campus at the Swinton Operations Complex at 434 South Swinton.
Thank you.
Thank you, Missy.
Commissioners.
Mark, you're kind of just in the embryonic stages of a budget, but do you feel like the CIP delivery, both the execution of what's been approved and developing the plan for the next fiscal year, do you feel like that is now, do you feel that staff is driving that, city staff?
Yes, Mayor, absolutely. What I've asked staff to do is, as part of the upcoming budget preparation project, as well as with our financial forecast, having special attention given to CIP execution, as well as our reserves and to see not only what's on our plate, what we've been able to process as far as throughput on projects and complete, and then as well as maybe freeing up some additional one-time monies to inject into the state project with staff on the CIP. Karen, myself, and Indy are working on that right now.
And who from the CRA is part of that?
We haven't engaged a CRA, but I do get a CRA monthly report on their projects, so that data will be brought to that meeting, and I'll ask Jeff to assign someone to that regular update process.
Okay. And lastly, we started the meeting out with the update on the pending legislation, and we don't yet know where that may go. If it stays on its current course, be a huge problem for FITS and this tennis tournament, if we can't extricate ourselves from that, may be a boon to the CIP, and based on the sequencing that Missy described, would we be able to move quickly on things that are in the hopper pending appropriation because they're either designed or shovel-ready for other reasons? Is there?
That's an intention that I have as I go through the process. I couldn't tell you that I'm ready to do that today.
Understood. Okay. Board members, any comments, questions? Thank you for coming tonight. Sandy?
I do have a comment. We had a
Can you move your
long workshop.
microphone a little closer?
We had a long workshop meeting last week with the work board, and I would like Mr. Costello to address for the commissioners the status of what transpired.
Okay. Yes, last week we had the joint workshop, and based on the board's direction, we provided a draft agreement, partnership agreement. It was titled a funding and programming agreement. And so the boards had discussed the contents of that. There were comments made, and our attorney is revising it, or actually has completed some of the revisions to that agreement, getting with the committee to re-review that, and then I believe work would be reviewing those revisions at their upcoming meeting, and then it would be scheduled for a CRA board meeting to rediscuss that. So that's where we're at this point. Communication's ongoing, and we've been working well together. Is a lot of these projects and reaching out to the community with the set transformation plan and the various CIP projects too, and getting the communication out with the assistance of work and the Northwest Southwest President Neighborhood Alliance. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Very difficult sitting here tonight hearing basically all kind of misinformation, but it's a necessary evil. I wouldn't put too much emphasis in commission comments prior to an election. I mean, this happens every year. There was a TIF analysis. There was the Cantor Pantaloon. You all remember that 4 years ago. Get something out, get something out, get something out. And I guess they disappeared out of the city by now. You know, something was rushed out. There was the takeover last year. So I caution us to stay the course. I mean, the development plans have been in all the RFPs. That's how they know what we want to do. So why wouldn't we put them in the RFP? I mean, and so we need to continue to do that. The CIP has been done by the city. They're the muscle. The CRA provides the funding. That's just how it's been. And I don't know if that's even understood by certain members of the commission to this day. Okay, the CRA gives the money. The city is responsible for the muscle and getting it done. and that's been blamed on the CRA for years. I, for one person, was not in a historically positioned to, you know, protect the CRA or advocate for the CRA when, you know, because I've been one of the ones for years saying we need to do what I'm hearing tonight as far as West Atlantic is concerned. So welcome aboard. Thank you. It's nice to hear. But I think that one of the reasons that, you know, Delray's success and lack thereof has a lot to do with the CRA, depending on who you ask, okay? But one of the obvious things that was revealed to me, and I'll be quiet, is the reason for an independent CRA board in Delray Beach was very obvious tonight, as far as I was concerned, because the campaigning, you know, every year, you know, it happens, and as a result of that, political pressure, things shift, and we tend to forget why we got to where we are now. Things just automatically is forgotten, okay? And there are laws and decisions not being made on purpose because of the election, okay? Because of the board changing in July with the CRA every year, and who got elected, who's going to be. All that affects this progress, and that gets missed. You know, it just gets missed. And we just need to be careful about that. Everybody wants to see the set in West Atlantic developed in the right way, okay? The question is who is it going to develop for? That's the underlying question. Who's it going to develop for? Some people want it to look like downtown, some don't. So we have to be careful. There are experts, their input, that's why they should be on the board anyway, okay? When it comes to their area of expertise, how that's kind of get twisted and muddled up. So we just have to be careful about that. There have been gains in this community with the CRA and work. It's still a long way to go, but there have been gains, okay, with those legacy organizations. And so we just have to keep some of that stuff in mind and not have you know, the short memories. You know, just be very careful of that because there has been progress. There's still a long way to go, but we just can't open the floodgate because there is some things that needs to be verified and checked out. We need to find out if you're there. We need to find out you are who you say you are. You know, and that takes time.
Those fair comments, Reggie. You know, I think that look, there's the Delray Beach CRA has been held up as an example of what a CRA as an engine can really do. And you know, there's been a lot of people sat in those seats that have that have been responsible for a huge amount of progress in this city. And you know, there is you know, unfortunately, politics creeps into a lot of decision making, and depending on the time of year, you know, that can be more than others. But I think that also fair. You know, that's and I think your point in terms of who it's developing for is very valid. But it also underscores the reason why data should carry the day rather than the emotions of the day and what's trending on Facebook or social media in terms of what it should be. But we're all in it together, and there's plenty of blame to go around. And just I think these meetings are very productive, even if some of them are a little tense, just in terms of getting to the brass tacks of things. And you know, you've pointed out some things that are very valid that a lot of people don't talk about. Yes, Kathy.
So to the workshop that we had, because a lot of people sometimes in Delray Beach don't like to talk about. When we're here today to talk about this, it seems like there's a little bit of like, should we talk about it or shouldn't we not? It was a tough meeting. It was a tough workshop. 3 hours, a need for having an agreement between each other. Just from some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier, where we to some people it may seem like we haven't done things fast enough or haven't done it right, and we've been criticized. Maybe it's time that we have the conversation. There was an agreement in front of us. We worked through it. It was a legal document that our legal team drafted, but our board, between the work board and our CRA board together collectively, set some policy with that document, and I'm hoping, and it's a community that does need us to at some point come together and start talking about it, about what we actually want to do. So if we want to actually get we want to start doing the stuff that we need to do, we need to start agreeing that we're partners and the community, and if we set it up right, we can start getting some of the stuff done. But it shouldn't be a conversation that we're afraid to have.
You did a wonderful job chairing that workshop.
I appreciate that.
Thanks, Kathy. To Kathy's point, I always believe that when we have the amount of knowledge that we have in the city and the amount of people to doing the right things here, we can accomplish anything that we want to do. Things happen. I just came on this board. I'm okay with the criticism, but give us an opportunity to get it right. I'm not in a rush to get it wrong. I'm patient enough to make sure we get it right this time around. And I've learned a lot in my short time being on the board, and I understand the politics of it. I'm okay with all of that. But let's be fair with the criticism. Let's work together as a team. This is one city. We have a part, West Atlanta, that has not been developed the way that it should have. So let's work together to get it done. I'm okay if we do something wrong, we get criticized for it, but let's work together. Let's not hinder this process by fighting amongst each other. Let's come together as city commissioners, CRA commissioners, community leaders, whoever, and let's get it right this time around. So back to the Pasadena and the Publix thing, I think everyone, if you had been to a meeting, how my view, and I think the majority of the board is, I'm not okay with Publix holding that land hostage for 5 years. To some of my fellow colleagues, to their point, Publix can withdraw their name from it in the 5th hour. Any developers can do that if we don't have it in the contract to prevent them from doing so. So I'm not okay waiting for 5 years for this project to take place. We got to make sure that we be fair to Publix, give them an opportunity, because we're in the middle of negotiation. When they come back, if it's not to what the CRA think is right for the community, then we will cancel that contract, or that proposal that they have. So let's stop pointing fingers. Let's work together, and let's get things done in the city.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Just a few comments, and once again, I apologize for being late. I was teaching a class. I watched probably the last 2 commission meetings and just had a couple of comments to inject, particularly around our executive director reporting and providing information to the commission. So I guess in the interest of fairness, we should understand that your direct manager and your direct report is your city manager. And I think should be your first point of information. I know that our executive director and our city manager meet frequently, and your direct line of communication should be with your city manager. Our executive director also provides a report, I think, is that monthly or?
Yes, not this month.
Monthly. And is that being placed on where on the agenda, the commission agenda, is the executive director report placed, if at all? Logistically, I think it'd be a good idea to place that report on consent agenda, at which point all of you will have it. And if you want to pull and ask specific questions to our executive director, do so through your city manager to ensure that he is going to be at that meeting to address your concerns, not having waited all night and then address questions during commissioners' comments. It's a little unfair to put him on the spot, and no matter how professional we all are, sometimes we can't pull all that information out of our ear when being placed on the spot. So I think it would be a great policy, make sure that his report is being placed on the consent agenda. He has some heads up to prepare for some of the concerns. And on the other hand, give you more direct answers, more direct and accurate answer. I go back to put them in writing. Give them to your city manager. Have your city manager communicate that to our executive director and our legal team. Will they all appear in the final agreement? Maybe or maybe not. But they will be addressed and discussed logistically, right? I just have a fundamental issue with dressing people down in public and asking them pointed questions, particularly during legal negotiation processes. Our executive director is not an attorney, and we have a legal team here to help us with that. I absolutely agree that it should be crystal clear as to what public's expectation is of us in terms of performance. They have deep hope to do in the future. I'm not saying that's their intent going in, but if we don't understand the standards by which we are measured, we spend a lot of time wondering what their performance they should, right? But what's expected of us? What are the triggers? Because what we don't want to do, as Commissioner Christopherson says, is being held hostage and giving them some legal pinpoint to be able to get out of an agreement where we didn't dot our I's and cross our T's. So we should be crystally clear what our expectations are, the CRA, the city, the triggers and such, to make sure we're not the ones in breach and we don't give them an out. And if I understand correctly, I think that's your point, Commissioner Chart. Okay. So that, you know, we have a habit of writing contracts for that doesn't have non-performance and clear performance clauses, and they come back to bite us all the time in this city. I see it a lot. I don't necessarily agree that we need an RFQ for going forward with the parcels. I believe an RFP is a non-subjective way of addressing this. An RFQ, when I decide what your qualifications are and what the values are to your qualifications, it leaves room for value judgments. I have a problem with that as an individual. As a CRA, we should as well. An RFP says, here's what we want, here is how we want it. We then get to measure apples for apples. And then we can justify whatever decision we make going forward. A combination of the two might be fine, but I do fundamentally don't want to get back into a value judgment as it relates to going forward, so we can get some more finger pointing about, well, why did you pick them? How did you decide they were qualified? How did you do their background and check their logistics and their references and such? So maybe a combination of the two will get us where we need to be, but I certainly don't think it should be just an RFQ in this case.
RFQ or RFP?
I don't think it should only an RFQ. And this, I may be repeating something that was said before because unfortunately I missed the last meeting. Thanks, Reggie.
Welcome.
So I also have just one issue about the Bright Line. I'm not sure, did we discuss that at all?
No.
So we have something that's our tracks that are running in our downtown. And I'm not sure where we are with the quiet zone or where we come up on that. I wasn't engaged at the time. And I'm not sure if something this is, we need to look at as a group to make sure.
I thought that we were talking about that next meeting, right?
Oh, okay.
Is that not correct, Mark?
Yes, Missy and I have been talking to the rail coordinator for the Regional Planning Council quite a bit about the status of all the crossings and the quiet zones, and there's a detailed plan for improvements, and they're coming to report out. We're trying to arrange for an update for you for the February 6th City Commission meeting, where you'll get the full report of everything.
Right.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good meeting.